The evening sun painted the Montana prairie in shades of golden amber as Clara stumbled through the tall grass, her torn dress catching on every thorn and bramble that lined her path. She had been walking for what felt like hours, though time seemed to blur together when your world had just fallen apart completely. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, and somewhere along the way she had lost one of her shoes. The other hung loose and muddy on her foot, making each step uncertain on the uneven ground. Behind her lay the wreckage of what she had thought was love, but turned out to be something much darker and more dangerous. She pressed her hand against her ribs where they ached from where he had grabbed her, and shook her like she was nothing more than a rag doll. The memory made her stomach turn, and she had to stop walking for a moment to catch her breath. In the distance she could see a small ranch house with warm yellow light glowing from its windows. Smoke curled up from the chimney, and she could make out the silhouettes of horses grazing peacefully in the pasture nearby. It looked like something from a different world entirely. A world where people still treated each other with decency and respect. She had grown up on a place much like this one back when her father was still alive and her mother still smiled. That felt like a lifetime ago now. Clara approached the house slowly, unsure if she should disturb whoever lived there. Her mama had always taught her not to bother strangers, especially not in her current state. But she had nowhere else to go, and the temperature was dropping fast as the sun disappeared behind the rolling hills. She could see her breath now in small white puffs, and her thin dress offered little protection against the evening chill. Through the window she glimpsed a man sitting at a wooden table reading by lamplight. He appeared to be in his 50s, with silver threading through his brown hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into prairie sun and wind. Something about his face seemed kind, though Clara had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Still, desperation made the choice for her. She knocked softly on the wooden door 3 times and waited. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor came from inside, followed by heavy footsteps. The door opened and the man stood there, taking in the sight of her with eyes that were brown and warm like coffee with cream. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Clara felt the words tumble out of her mouth before she could stop them. "I am sorry to bother you, sir, but I have been walking for a long time and I do not have anywhere to go." The man, whose name was Thomas, though she did not know it yet, stepped aside without hesitation. "Come in out of the cold," he said gently. His voice was deep and steady, like the sound of distant thunder on a summer evening. "You look like you could use some help." Clara stepped inside and immediately felt the warmth of the house wrap around her like a blanket. The interior was simple but welcoming, with handmade furniture and quilts draped over chairs. The scent of coffee and something baking in the oven filled the air. Thomas gestured toward a chair near the fireplace, but Clara shook her head. "I am not clean anymore," she said, and the words came out as barely more than a whisper. She looked down at her torn dress and muddy hands and felt shame wash over her in waves. "I should not sit on your nice furniture. I should not even be here." Thomas studied her face for a moment, and something in his expression shifted. He disappeared into another room and returned with a soft cloth and a basin of warm water. He set them down on a small table and pulled the chair closer. "Sit," he said simply. It was not a command but rather an invitation, spoken with such quiet authority that Clara found herself obeying. Thomas knelt beside the chair and began gently cleaning the dirt and blood from her hands. His touch was careful and respectful, as if she were made of something precious that might break. No one had touched her with such gentleness in longer than she could remember. Clara felt tears beginning to flow again, but these were different from the tears she had cried earlier. These tears carried something like relief in them. Thomas worked in silence for several minutes, cleaning her hands and then carefully tending to the scratches on her arms. When he reached for the cloth to clean her face, Clara pulled back instinctively. "I am not clean anymore," she whispered again, and this time the words carried the full weight of everything that had happened to her. "I can never be clean again." Thomas paused with the cloth in his hands and looked directly into her eyes. His gaze was steady and unflinching, but filled with something that took Clara a moment to recognize. It was compassion. Pure and simple compassion without judgment or pity. "Young lady," he said quietly, "every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. That includes you. Nothing that has happened to you changes your worth as a human being." Clara shook her head because she had been told so many different things over the past months. She had been told she was worthless and stupid and lucky that anyone would want her at all. She had been told that what happened was her own fault for being naive and trusting. But here was this stranger, this man who owed her nothing, telling her something entirely different. Thomas continued cleaning her face with the same gentle care he had shown her hands. When he finished, he stood and walked to a chest in the corner of the room. He returned with a soft blue dress that looked like it would fit her reasonably well. "This belonged to my wife," he said simply. "She passed away 3 years ago, but I think she would want it to go to someone who needs it. You can change in the back room and I will heat up some soup for you." Clara took the dress with shaking hands. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked. Thomas smiled for the first time since she had arrived, and the expression transformed his entire face. "Because kindness is never wasted," he replied. "My Martha used to say that every act of kindness creates ripples like throwing a stone into still water. You never know how far those ripples will travel or whose life they might touch." Clara changed into the blue dress, which fit her almost perfectly. It smelled faintly of lavender and sunshine, as if it had been stored carefully with love. When she returned to the main room, Thomas had set the table with 2 bowls and a loaf of fresh bread. The soup was thick with vegetables and beef, and it was the first real meal Clara had eaten in days. They ate together in comfortable silence as the fire crackled in the hearth and the wind whispered around the corners of the house. Finally Thomas spoke again. "You do not have to tell me what happened," he said. "But you are welcome to stay here as long as you need to. I have a spare room and plenty of work around the ranch if you want to earn your keep. The only thing I ask is that you be patient with yourself. Healing takes time." Clara felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. She had expected judgment or questions or demands for explanations. Instead she found acceptance and shelter and the kind of unconditional kindness she had thought existed only in childhood memories. Over the following weeks Clara slowly began to rebuild herself. Thomas taught her how to care for the horses and how to mend fences and how to bake bread that would make the whole house smell like heaven. He never asked about her past and he never made her feel like she owed him anything for his kindness. Instead he treated her like family. Like someone worth caring about. One evening as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Clara finally told him her story. She told him about the man who had seemed so charming at first. About how he had gradually isolated her from her friends and family. About how his love had turned possessive and then violent. About how she had finally found the courage to run, but not before he had done things that made her feel broken and dirty. Thomas listened without interrupting, and when she finished speaking he was quiet for a long time. Finally he said, "I am glad you were brave enough to leave. It takes tremendous courage to walk away from what you know even when what you know is hurting you." Clara wiped tears from her eyes. "But I feel so ashamed," she whispered. "I should have known better. I should have seen the signs earlier." Thomas turned to face her fully. "Shame is not yours to carry," he said firmly. "You were not responsible for his choices or his actions. You were responsible only for your own choices, and you chose to survive. You chose to keep going even when it would have been easier to give up. That makes you stronger than you know." As autumn turned to winter, Clara found herself settling into a rhythm of life that felt both foreign and familiar. She discovered that she was good with the horses and that they seemed to sense something in her that made them trust her completely. Thomas taught her how to read the weather and how to preserve food for the long winter months. He showed her how to quilt and how to play chess and how to laugh again. Most importantly, he showed her through his actions every single day that she was valuable and worthy of respect. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly outside the windows, Clara helped Thomas prepare a feast. They had invited the neighboring ranchers and their families, and the house filled with warmth and laughter and the kind of genuine fellowship that Clara had almost forgotten existed. As she watched Thomas interact with his friends and neighbors, she realized something that took her breath away. This man who had saved her was not just kind to her. He was kind to everyone. He helped his elderly neighbor with repairs when arthritis made the work too difficult. He shared his harvest with families who were struggling. He never spoke about these acts of generosity, but Clara had observed them quietly over the months. When the guests had gone home and they were cleaning up together, Clara finally found the words she had been searching for. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything. For seeing me as a person worth helping when I could not see it myself." Thomas paused in his work and smiled. "You helped yourself," he replied. "I just provided a safe place for you to remember who you really are." Clara nodded and felt the last of the darkness that had been weighing on her heart lift away like smoke from the chimney. She was clean again. Not because someone had washed the dirt from her skin but because someone had helped her wash the shame from her soul. That night as she lay in her bed listening to the wind whistle softly around the house, Clara thought about ripples in still water. She thought about kindness and how it could transform not just the person receiving it but the person giving it as well. She thought about second chances and new beginnings and the way love could come in forms you never expected. Outside her window the snow continued to fall, covering the prairie in pristine white. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight Clara was warm and safe and surrounded by the kind of love that asks for nothing in return except the chance to keep giving. She closed her eyes and smiled, knowing that she would carry Thomas and Martha's kindness with her for the rest of her life, and someday when she was stronger and more sure of herself she would find ways to create her own ripples. She would help other women who found themselves lost and afraid. She would offer the same unconditional acceptance that had been offered to her. She would prove that kindness truly is never wasted. The prairie wind sang softly outside her window like a lullaby, and Clara drifted off to sleep in her dreams. She was riding across endless grasslands on a strong, gentle horse. The sun was warm on her face and she was heading toward a horizon full of possibilities. She was finally free and she was finally home.